Welcome to 110 Daily here on a Tuesday. I'm Josh. He's Chris. We've got a great show coming up for you today. We're going to talk Monday Night Football, a double dose of Monday Night Football, give our NFL top 10, our power rankings like we do every Tuesday. Humor me, please, as always. Previewing a big night in college basketball, do some baseball talk with the winter meetings going on, and finish as we do on Tuesdays, wondering what we are doing. But we start with last night's NFL action. Chris, there might actually be good teams in the NFC East. Maybe not good, but at least competent.
Yeah. They NFC East really coming to life and stirring up the pot within the last 48 hours. You have the Giants beating the Seahawks on Sunday, and then one of the games we're about to discuss here, Washington defeating the previously undefeated Steelers. I kind of woke up this morning thinking that part might have been a dream, because it just seems, so absurd. But then I realized it was 2020, and I was like, well, that crazy thing must have actually happened in real life. So yeah, we had some interesting football. The NFC East, like you said, showing some signs of life. I mean, I'm not getting too excited, but hey, there was something going on there. And we have two impactful games to discuss from yesterday. That Steelers Washington game, and then also Bills win against the 49ers yesterday. That was also not as many, top implications of that game, but I think also some key takeaways we'll get into there as well.
And last week, when we were talking about the Eagles and their loss on Monday night,
Mm-hmm.
it was one of the points I made, the thing that I've sort of tried to hammer home in the last week or so is for anybody in this division to win more than 5 games, they were going to have to win a game outside of the division. And then all of a sudden, it happened twice in the span of 48 hours, like you said, and it was the Seahawks and the Steelers. It wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't some give me against the Bengals that the Giants and Washington had some success to build these little winning streaks and these good runs of form that they've been in. All of a sudden, that just translated against some of the better teams in the league, and now it changes, at least for me, how I feel about this division, because you can't argue with what Washington did last night.
Right. I mean, you can't argue with it. I think, it was a nice, you're absolutely right in terms of who it was they got those wins against was, of course, incredibly significant. It also just timed out well because both those opponents, the 49ers and, pardon me, not the 49ers, the Seahawks and the Steelers were both in the timing worked out for them to be able to capitalize on those teams where there was some cracks for both of those clubs in the foundation for the Seahawks offensively. For the Steelers, we saw how close their game was last weekend, where they barely snuck by. I'm blanking on they barely got by the Ravens last weekend. That was a 5-point game. So yeah, I mean, I found that stat amazing from last night that Washington's 4-7 record heading into last night's game was the worst for any team in NFL history to beat a team that entered 11-0 or better. So that kind of thing just does not happen much. Of course, this game came down to the wire. Uh, I think a lot of credit. I want to say one thing I want to say that came to my mind that people, of course, have been talking about is a lot of credit to Alex Smith,
Mm-hmm.
who is much more than just a feel good comeback story. I mean, just him stepping foot on the field at all this year and playing at all, like that is a feel good story. That is an incredible story. But it's become even more than that. He just helped engineer their rally to knock out the league's last undefeated team. And the veteran savvy, the help that he's gotten from his receivers has allowed that offense recently to kind of just keep producing at a high level pretty consistently. It's not perfect. Again, nobody's claiming this offense and Alex Smith is all of a sudden lighting the world on fire or anything too over the top. But they've had some injuries during this 3-game winning streak. It hasn't been a perfect situation. That offense has kind of just kept chugging along. So all the credit in the world to Alex Smith and what he's been able to do there. I don't know how much to make, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts to make of this for the bigger picture for Washington, other than I mean, obviously, there's no doubting what they just did. Like, I'm not just, there's no dispute of that. I guess I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to figure out what to make of this team now. Clearly, they're, right now, that there's no denying they're in the NFC East title race, but I don't know as far as actually how great of a football team they really are.
Yeah, and I don't think any of these teams in the NFC East are actually good. And Washington loses another player in Antonio Gibson in this game to just
Mm-hmm.
add to that list of injuries. But there's a reason that pretty much every team Alex Smith has been on has been good.
Mm-hmm.
Not many of them have been great. You can very easily argue none of them have been great. But he is and he's not the same player he was in terms of his athleticism because he almost lost his leg. But he is he just helps you win. That sounds sort of really simple and kind of silly, but he doesn't make mistakes. He elevates the players around him and he just manages the game, and that's not a bad thing. That's a compliment. He doesn't hurt you. And so when you're able to put a quarterback in that can make that little bit of difference, can give you that drive that you need late in the game, can stay composed when you go down a couple scores early like they did in this one, and just, like you said, sort of keep chugging along, they're not beating themselves. And sometimes that's enough. The other place they deserve a lot of credit is on that defensive line and that defense
Yeah.
in general. It wasn't Pittsburgh's defense that made the play at the end. It was Washington's. And Montez Sweat was sensational. That defensive line does not get the credit it deserves. They're playing really well right now. And yeah, like you said, we've never seen this before. Everybody's talking about this stunning upset. I don't want to sit here and pretend like I thought the Steelers were going to lose this game because that would just be
Mm-hmm.
disingenuous.
Right.
But it's not all that shocking to me because, as we've talked about before, they can't run the football.
Right.
So when you have a defensive line that's getting pressure with four and disrupting Ben's timing, and you can shut down Juju Smith-Schuster so that the weapons aren't as effective, you have some drops in there, your defense makes a couple big plays, all of a sudden, the Steelers just aren't that scary. Their defense was good, it wasn't great, but to a certain extent, I feel like we should have seen this coming. Maybe not this game against this team, but everything you saw is the reason why you, Josh, and I are all so skeptical about the Steelers, even when they were still undefeated and beating team, winning game after game. Is they're not complete, and when they don't have that running game going, they're throwing the ball 50 plus times, and if that's not resulting in 400 yards or 350 yards, anybody can go beat them if everything sort of breaks right and you get the pressure you need so you can drop 7, 8 guys into coverage, whatever it might be. The formula is there, and Washington was just the first team that was able to solve it.
Yeah, and it's a Steelers team that doesn't have 18 different paths to victory. I mean, there's
Right.
a formula that works, but it's not a formula where when that formula isn't working, there's another way to pivot. Like it's very clear what their approach is, and you were just mentioning it. And I think and people had mentioned this, and we had all talked about it. We were seeing some cracking in the foundation. I mean, everybody's been talking about how 11-0, but it's not as if this was an 11-0 team that people weren't being skeptical of. That there weren't people pointing out like, okay, when does this end? There are clear problems. Not there are clear ways that this could go wrong in a game. That we're not just sort of counting on them to just win 5 more games and finish the season undefeated. This was a team that has played on the edge for most of the season, and yesterday they fell off that edge. I mean, that's essentially my take. They got lucky in sneaking by a depleted Ravens team last weekend by just 5 points, as we mentioned before, and I think that was a sign that it was getting there was they were teetering on the edge there, really close, and against Washington, like you said, their running game was just non-existent. There were some bad drops from receivers, and like you said, again, they live and die by the arm of Ben Roethlisberger, and when things aren't clicking at 100% and when that formula is not working, they can find themselves vulnerable if the opponent is able to capitalize and has the strengths that match up well. And that's what we saw against Washington. All of a sudden, the Steelers' grip of the AFC's number one seed and the only first round playoff bye is gone. They're now tied with the Chiefs with one loss apiece, and it could very well come down to tiebreakers. I was really interested last night to take a look at the remaining schedules for both of those teams, the Steelers and the Chiefs, because there is a scenario in which it comes down to one big game for each team. For Pittsburgh, they play at the Bills this weekend, then at the Bengals, home against Indianapolis, and at the Browns. So that's not a nothing schedule when you have Indianapolis on there, but especially playing at the Bills and then at the end at the Browns. The Chiefs play at the Dolphins this weekend, at the Saints next weekend, Falcons, Chargers at home to end the year. So I could see a scenario in which it comes down to, how does how do the Steelers do against at the Bills versus how do the Chiefs do at the Saints? That could very well be the difference in who gets that number one seed in the AFC. I think that's very possible that it could go to either team, but those are the two games that I'm looking for. The game for each of those teams, and there are a couple other good ones in there as well. It's not an easy path. It's not one team schedule is, three easy games and one pretty easy game, and the other team has three hard games. It's pretty balanced in that both these teams have some tough competition, and I'm really interested to see how the Steelers do against the Bills this upcoming weekend. I feel like that is going to tell us a lot.
Yeah, I think there's every chance that the Steelers lose multiple times still this season. In addition to this one, that they end with at least 3 losses. With those 3 games in there, Cincinnati, they should be fine. But Buffalo, Indianapolis, Cleveland, that's 3 playoff teams.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're going to go 0-3, but could easily see 1-2.
Sure.
The way things are going right now. And that was a nice transition you had there to the other game that happened last night. How does an NFL team not have a Monday Night Football win since 1999?
A very good question. A very good question. They were the only team, right, that didn't have a Monday Night Football win this century, right?
I would have to assume so. I'm
pretty sure that's what they said on the broadcast.
You're probably right. How?
It's impressive, honestly.
And it's not like they've been terrible the entire 2 decades either. Right. Now, there are some rough patches in there. They haven't exactly been a perennial playoff team, but regardless, they got it done last night, and Josh Allen looked really good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was firing on all cylinders last. This was as good as it gets. This was top of his game. Josh Allen, 375 yards, 4 touchdowns. A couple of stats stood out to me with him. First Bills quarterback with an 80% completion percentage and 4 passing touchdowns in a game ever. No other Bills quarterback has ever done that. Another impressive stat to me that was sort of just revealing of how incredible he was. This was his 3rd game of the season with 375 plus passing yards, 3 plus passing touchdowns, 130 plus passer rating. He joins 2013 Drew Brees as the only player since at least 1950 to do that 3 times in a season. That's just the kind of, he has had incredible, when he is at the top of his game, it is really something to watch. That passing offense is just incredibly hard to stop when he is on, and he was at his best last night. This looked like a Bills team to me that, if things break right, if the matchups break right, if they're performing at that kind of level, which is a big if, because this isn't something that we've seen from them every single game, of course. But that looked like, for me, who I haven't, I'm not going to sit here and say I've been watching every Bills game this season. For me, sort of tuning in and getting a real glimpse at this Bills team, that team that we saw on the field last night looked like a team capable of a deep postseason run under the right circumstances. Not saying it's going to happen. I'm not predicting it even. But when that team is right, I think that if they're in the right spot, down the stretch into the playoffs, and they match up with the right opponents for them, there's a chance of a deep playoff run here. I don't really have. I really believe that they have that talent.
Oh, no doubt. And even in this game where we can praise Josh Allen all day long, he had that one throw that was,
Sure.
I don't know what he was doing, but ultimately it was irrelevant and wiped out because there was a defensive penalty on Richard Sherman, so the interception didn't count. But that was the
Mhm.
moment I went, ah, yes, there's that side of Josh Allen. You're always going to get it. It's not even necessarily a bad thing because the trade off is for the all of the brilliance he had, you get moments like that. It's just who he is.
Mhm.
I'll live with that because of the upside he gives you. And the other thing that we need to give credit to the Bills front office for, they made a concerted effort to get him better weapons.
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs is already over 1,000 yards for the season, just did what he did again last night. Always reliable to give you 7, 8 catches a game. Cole Beasley had the best game of his
Yeah.
career. It You give a guy like Josh Allen who can extend plays, who can avoid the rush. He doesn't necessarily always make the best reads, but he's gotten much more accurate. He has all of the tools, so you give him weapons where he doesn't have to do it all himself. You make the game easier for him, and this is the result: is he's playing at an MVP level. We can debate whether he should be in that conversation, but that's how good he's been to the point that you brought up with all of those statistics. It's remarkable, and the start to this game was really bizarre.
It was.
You had two fourth and one stops, followed by a fumble by Zach Moss on the 2 yard line, and then from there it was all Bills. But you just didn't really know what was happening, and then they get the two interceptions later on. When to the 49ers' credit, they didn't stop fighting. They were clearly outmatched because they don't have their quarterback, and Josh Allen's a better quarterback anyway. And the Bills have the better skill players right now because of the injuries to George Kittle and such. But anytime that they might have gotten back in, they got a little bit of momentum. There was a turnover. The Bills made a play to just really not make this interesting by the end.
Right, right, and and I think from the first of all, I guess I'd say, again, just a final Josh Allen point. I completely agree in that I was just impressed by his poise and his ability to extend plays. Like that was
Mm-hmm.
just the thing for me that it happened again and again, and a lot of credit to their offensive line for that as well. But his ability to extend plays where I kept thinking, oh, this could be a problem. I just probably busy plays where he was able to keep poise. That was impressive to me, where he was able to just push through it, scramble out of the pocket, do what needed to get done to get the ball downfield. And as far as the 49ers, not a death blow to their playoff hopes,
Not
but
at all.
it's not. But it's rough. It's still it's not the end for them. They're not going to be able to reach 10 wins, even in a perfect scenario. The best they could reach is 9, but that could be enough. Um, I'm what for me though was bigger is that I think we saw on display some of their biggest flaws and deficiencies. It, their team's offense was disjointed at moments. It obviously misses Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle. The biggest hole that I actually saw was a non-existent edge rush on the defensive end. Nick Bosa was incredible in 2019. Of course, he's out for the year with an ACL, and his absence I think is really big because that was one thing I saw. They just were not able to give Josh Allen enough trouble. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
part of that is credit to it's of course it goes multiple directions. Credit to the Bills offensive line and credit to Allen as well. But the 49ers, I don't think they can slow down good offenses without something more happening there. They really miss that presence, that edge rush presence that can really disrupt an opponent's offense. That was something for me that I saw as like, yeah, I don't think they can slow down a lot of great offenses with what they have there right now.
Think about right that the defense run by Robert Saleh, who rightfully so is getting all kinds of head coaching buzz surrounding him. We got lawmakers in Michigan trying to get the Lions to hire him. They didn't force a punt until I think it was there were less than 3 minutes left in the game.
Right.
They got the stop at the beginning on at the goal line, but they didn't force a punt until the game was over. And Yeah, I completely agree with you with Nick Bosa. That's the injury that gets lost in all of this. And I think you're absolutely right that they just don't have the personnel on defense. And Richard Sherman could not stay with Stephon Diggs. They need all of their pieces. This is a team built on the collective talent. Jimmy Garoppolo is not the reason they made the Super Bowl last year. It's that complete roster that John Lynch built, and they don't have that roster, both on defense and offense right now. And to the playoff picture, you've got the Vikings and Cardinals both at 6-6. So mathematically, right, they're certainly not out of it. I just feel much better about where the Vikings, specifically where the Vikings are at right now. That all of a sudden they have come back from nowhere and are starting to look like the team that at least I expected them to be this season. I picked them to win the division. That's not going to happen. But they are very clearly the second best team in the NFC North now, which I think just about everybody expected. And you never know with the Cardinals. I still like the Cardinals better than this 49ers team. So it's an uphill battle, but right, it's there for the taking if they can find a way to really finish the season strong. There's just a lot of concerns and reasons to believe that's not going to happen.
Right, right. When you combine those concerns and those clear problems where I don't see I don't see necessarily an answer for those things that we're pointing out, those holes. I mean, it's possible they can improve there, of course, but I don't see something where that gives me great optimism that that's going to change quickly. And when you look at the teams that are ahead of them that you just mentioned, both of them have, they're imperfect. There are ways that it goes poorly for them to finish the season, but I certainly, given all the factors involved, I'm with you in that I have slightly more confidence, not a ton more confidence, but a bit more confidence in both those other teams. Combine that with the concerns about the 49ers and like you said, the path it's not impossible, but they're going to have to take care of business and things are going to have to break right. And I just, I can't say I have any confidence in that actually happening.
They're hoping to get Garoppolo and Kittle back, some of these guys back eventually, but you're to the point now where you got to win out. Right. So you can't just say we got to hang in there until we feel better about our roster. Obviously, Bosa's not coming back. You got to win starting now with whoever's out there, and then hope that you get some momentum going, and then these guys come back and you put together a run. But yeah, I don't see that happening. That game was a pretty telling and fair assessment of where those two teams are at the moment, I think.
Yeah, well said. 100%.
When we come back, we will be sticking with the NFL to give our NFL top 10, our power rankings that we do every Tuesday. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.